It's one of my favorites, but.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our weekly chat. This week, we're going to talk about last week's content, which was the micronutrients, and we had a lot of good questions. I hope you're enjoying this week's lesson, which was on meal planning. I will say that just reading through the message board discussions motivated me to think, oh, I need to go grocery shop, make my list, and prep some ingredients and get things ready and cook a little bit more at home. So I will start off with the questions that we had for today. The first question was, what are the most important steps to look for in food labels? And it was a two-parter. The second one said, what are the most dangerous chemicals to watch for in foods? And one of the things that I'm going to post for you on the website is this handout. It's from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and it's geared towards heart health, but it has some suggestions on things to watch when you're label reading. And so I will make sure that that is available to you. I ask people to look at total fat, but really more than total fat, I'm concerned about the amount of saturated fat, because we do know that saturated fat is closely correlated with risk for heart disease and the episode of cardiac events that occur. So look at the amount of saturated fats and try to keep that as low as you can. And also trans fats. Trans fats give you a double whammy. They will lower your HDL, which is the good cholesterol. They will raise your LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. And trans fats are found in a lot of processed foods. When we take something like an oil, and we force hydrogen into it to make it a solid, then we get a shortening. And that creates trans fats. Having that type of product extends the shelf life of products, and that's why it's been popular in processed foods. So watch for that. However, starting, I think it is the year, it's either 2016 or 2017, I can't remember. But in the United States, trans fats will then be banned in all food products. So it's no longer something we're going to have to really keep an eye out for. Sodium, watch if you're following a low sodium diet. A food that qualifies by definition as low sodium is 140 milligrams or less. And I also like people to monitor the sugars. Now, right now it's hard to tell what's added sugars and natural sugars, but try to pick foods that have less than 15 grams of sugar per serving. Which leads into the next question that says, what is the safe or medical recommendation on the number of grams of sugar in a given product? And that's sugar per serving. And I'm going to go with the American Heart Association recommendation. They recommend limiting the amount of added sugars you consume to no more than half of your daily discretionary calorie allowance. And the discretionary calories are the ones that don't necessarily have to be healthy calories. They're just some calories for the things that you consider treats or just the occasional use foods. And for women, this tends to be about 100 calories a day, and for men, about 150 discretionary calories a day. So in terms of grams of sugar, that means 25 grams for women and 37 grams for men. So in terms of added sugars, not the natural sugars, so this would be the obvious sugar sources, like in soda pops, ice creams, things like that. 25 grams for women, 37 for men. There was a question about what kinds of sugars are found in diet sodas, and somebody else had asked, is it really different than regular sodas? And yes, it is. The regular sodas use high fructose corn syrup. Diet sodas are going to use sugar substitutes. The sugar substitutes do not contain the same amount of calories. They're considered calorie-free. And some of them, the digestion is slightly altered. So the typical ones you're going to see are saccharin, which is one of the oldest ones that's been around. Sucralose is the Splenda. Aspartame is the NutraSweet. Stevia, Truvia are being used more and more in those products. And sugar substitutes are suitable for people with diabetes, and they do not promote tooth decay. And they have been shown to help people who wanted to lose weight and maintain that weight loss. Now, the only thing I caution people about is make sure that your use of sugar substitutes, like in diet sodas, isn't replacing water, which is good to make sure you have in every day, or other sources like, we're going to talk about coffee at the end of this, and tea can be good sources of fluids too. So you want to make sure that you're not using it at the expense of other foods that might contain nutrition. There was a question about feeding a 6-month-old. I used to work with WIC, Women, Infant, Children, so I've been out of that field for a while, but this question I could answer. What are the solid foods I should be feeding a 6-month-old? And at 6 months, they may or may not be on iron-fortified cereals, which is one of the first things we introduce. So if not, it's time to start that, because the iron stores in an infant that they got from pregnancy only last for about 4 to 6 months. So that's why we say by 6 months they should be on iron-fortified cereal. And they should still be either nursing, receiving breast milk, or iron-fortified formula. And it's also time for pureed fruits, vegetables, and pureed meats. You want to introduce foods one at a time and wait 3 days apart before introducing another food so that you can monitor if there's any allergic reaction or intolerance. I read that folate's the vitamin and folic acid's the man-made enrichment, and that's true. Folic acid that is man-made as a source of folate is highly absorbable in the synthetic form. And so if you need the supplement, pregnancy is a good example, then the folic acid supplements are highly beneficial. And the word folate is used as a general term to represent both folate and folic acid. The second question said, when reading a label, how do we know if it's natural sugar or added sugar? With the current labels, you do not know. Now, there was a question about the new food labels coming out in 2016, hopefully. We've been looking at the new food labels and leaving comments on them for a year now. So I want to show you what sort of changes you can expect, and these are for the American food labels. If you're in a different country, you could probably go Google and find on some websites if there's any proposed changes. So this is going to be a little hard to read, but I'm going to post the link that if you want to read about the new food labels, and it'll show you samples, you can do that. So that'll be posted. But some of the things that we're going to see is the serving sizes and the calories are going to be more prominent. This one says 8 servings per container, and you can see that the calories are much bigger in terms of the word calories and then the calories themselves. So that's one of the changes. The daily values are going to be updated, and they're going to be put on the left of the label instead of on the right, because our eyes track from left to right, and we want people to realize it's important to understand what the daily values are. Now, the added sugars are listed there, and so they're going to have to distinguish between naturally occurring sugars and added sugars, and we've been asking for this for a long time, so that's a really good change. Notice at the bottom the nutrients of importance that are going to be required. We're going to also be requiring vitamin D and potassium now, because those have become nutrients of concern in terms of the public health. The calcium and iron will still be on there. Vitamin A and C, which have been on the past, will now be optional, whether or not they're including them. The actual amounts of those have to be declared instead of just percentages. The biggest thing that I want to show you is the portion sizes. In the past, the portion sizes have been based on what we recommended. Legally, portion sizes have to be based on what people typically eat. And I'm going to use ice cream as an example. We have as the current portion size for ice cream a 1/2 cup. Very few people actually eat a 1/2 cup. The standard serving size for ice cream is 1 cup. So the new labels will list ice cream as 1 cup. Soda pop is another example. Serving sizes have been based on 8 ounces, but a typical can of pop is 12 ounces. So that's now what it will represent. So keeping that in mind, here's an example of the proposed change to the label, that if it's a pint of ice cream, which is 2 cups, they're going to have 2 columns. The first column will show you per 1 cup, which will now become the recommended serving size. And the second column will show you the nutrition information if you were to eat the entire pint of ice cream. And this is an example of an alternate format that's being considered. I like the looks of this, where it says the quick facts, avoid too much, get enough. I think that will just make sense to the average person. But the final decisions are still being made. They're still taking comments on the labels. And as I said, I'll give you a link to that. Okay, it says the FDA is proposing a requirement to list amounts of added sugars on the nutrition facts panel. It says, for example, instead of listing that 65 grams have been added to Coke of sugar, the company would be required to list that this amount is 130% of the recommended daily intake. And what are my feelings? Do I think it will change consumer behavior? I do think it's a good idea. People seem to be more interested lately in what's added sugars versus natural sugars because the media is reporting these types of things. In terms of behavior change, I think we'll get there. It's going to be a slow process. People are resistant to change, but I think with enough exposure to this new information, they will slowly start to change some of their habits, and then hopefully those become permanent. Someone asked about the green, yellow, red light system. When would it be instituted? And I wasn't sure if they were talking about in terms of an educational tool to help people with weight management or in terms of labeling. It's already being used a lot to help pediatric overweight and obesity, that they list foods that are higher in calories, total fat and sugar as being red foods. The yellow foods would be those to consume in moderation, and the green foods would be like your fresh fruits and your vegetables and your whole grains. And it's worked well. In terms of labeling, more than anything, that food can be sold prepackaged with the traffic light label on the front of it. So they would list it with either a red signal light, yellow signal light, or green signal light based on how much fat, saturated fat, sugar, and salt is in the food. And foods with green traffic lights would be considered healthier and preferred over those with the red ones. And the idea behind this is that type of system is going to be much easier for the consumer to understand, and also children, that if we want to teach children how to select their own foods when their parents aren't always around to help them with that. There's no discussion at this point of making it mandatory. The food industry, as you can imagine, is not embracing this idea because they see that having a red traffic light symbol on there will make people avoid foods, and it could. The goal would be education, to teach people that these foods should be in limited amounts, but it doesn't mean they have to be avoided. But anyway, we're not to the point yet that it's even been talked about whether or not this is going to be a requirement. There was a question about the book Wheat Belly, and they wanted to know what I thought about that. Wheat Belly was a book that came out a couple of years ago, maybe just a year ago, by a cardiologist, William Davis, and he found that when he excluded wheat products from his diet, he lost weight. He did it with his clients and they lost weight. So keep in mind, this is a very informal study. It did not adhere to what we would call research studies. And basically, there's no scientific evidence that foods with gluten are going to cause you to gain weight any more than any other food. And his diet did remove the high fat and high sugar foods, but it also removed an entire food group, the legumes, the beans. And beans are packed with protein and nutrients. So for that reason, I wasn't crazy about his recommendations. And also, it was a higher meat diet. And so if you have high cholesterol, if you're at risk for heart disease, you might raise your risk even further by focusing on a diet that is higher in total fats and total cholesterol. So really, the best way to lose weight is to eat a balanced diet that restricts your calories and to exercise. His clients that lost the weight didn't do it because they were avoiding wheat products. They lost weight because they were consuming less calories. Then there was a question also about what's a good rule of thumb for vitamin D intake and how do you keep your vitamin D levels in the proper range. The RDA for adults is 600 international units of vitamin D a day. If you're 70 years or older, that goes up to 800 units. And to meet this level, you want foods that are high in vitamin D. Some examples are fortified foods such as milk and yogurt. The dairy products are fortified with vitamin D. You will find some cereals fortified. Fatty fish are a good source of vitamin D. Salmon, trout, tuna, halibut. There are some mushrooms also high in vitamin D. And sun exposure is another way. Getting 10 to 20 minutes of sun exposure per day will help your body produce its own vitamin D. We use so much sunscreen that we're not getting adequate amounts of sun exposure. But you do want to be careful and make sure that it's a time of day you're not likely to burn when you expose yourself to the sun. And be careful and don't overdo it, because high levels of vitamin D have not been shown to provide any greater benefit. And too much vitamin D can actually cause some health problems. Someone asked, how do we identify the micronutrients we need and whether or not we're getting the right amounts? The best way is what we had you do in lesson 1. Record a few days worth of meals in the MyPlate Super Tracker, and Super Tracker is going to tell you what nutrients you were deficient in. There was a question about oils. They've said, I've read articles and a book about oils causing inflammation in the body. What are we supposed to believe in terms of the types of oils? And to reduce inflammation, one of the things you want to do is to focus on whole grains. We know that refined carbohydrates, simple sugars and starch, do increase inflammation, but whole grains, such as whole wheat pasta, whole wheat breads, using bran in products, using legumes, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, brown rice. Those things can all reduce inflammation. In terms of the oils, it's the omega-3 fatty acids that promote a reduced inflammatory effect. And foods that are high in omega-3 would be fish, especially the fatty fish, such as salmon, and walnuts, chia seeds, and flax seeds, although they don't convert efficiently to EPA and DHA, which I talked about in the very first lesson that you went through. So in terms of oils, you want to use more of the omega-3 oils and less of the omega-6 oils in order to reduce inflammation. And the best way to do that is the use of olive oil, which is high in omega-3, and canola oil, which is also higher in omega-3. So those are the 2 oils I prefer for people to use. In order to reduce the omega-6 intake, those are primarily found in sunflower, safflower, and corn oil. So I caution patients about using too much of the corn oil in particular. And corn oil is already abundant in our diet. It's one of the primary oils used in processed foods, and that's one of the reasons we have higher omega-6 content in our diet. And with olive oil, I recommend that you use virgin olive oil because it's gone through less heat processing. In addition to canola and olive oil, peanut oil is a good source also of omega-3s. The next question, I'd like to know if taking nutrients in capsule form is a healthy way of getting what we eat. And there were quite a few of you that asked about supplements. And I think I mentioned this in one of the earlier chats, but there are over 40 nutrients our body needs. We don't always eat well on a daily basis. And so yes, a multivitamin and mineral supplement can help fill that gap. You want to choose one that provides approximately 100% of the RDA. I ask clients to read what percentage of the RDA each nutrient is being provided in and to not exceed 150% the RDA. You will find some products, particularly on the B vitamins, that they may be giving you 1,000 times the level recommended, stating that it will give you an energy boost. Honestly, when you take in that amount, your body can't utilize it, it will get rid of it. You are going to urinate out the extra B vitamins. And so you really are paying to just urinate out the excess that your body can't use. So look for a label that's pretty consistent with 100% the RDA for all nutrients. If it's, 120% for one and 10% for another, then you're not getting good coverage across the board. And we do know that taking folic acid can help prevent birth defects. Taking calcium and vitamin D in addition to what you get in the diet can lower your risk for osteoporosis. So there can be some good reasons. So tied into that says, what over-the-counter vitamins and minerals would you recommend? And somebody said, is it worth it to buy name brand supplements? And this is always hard to answer because there are so many supplements out there. They're not closely monitored by the FDA. And so some recommendations: check the label to see what the active ingredients are. Avoid the mega doses, which I've already mentioned. If something's giving you 500%, 1,000%, it's not necessary, and you're not going to be able to utilize that amount at one time anyway. Check the expiration dates. Sometimes when they go on sale, it's because they're close to expiration, and they may not have the same potency. And be careful in terms of buying supplements compared to what you're eating. If you're already buying a lot of fortified foods like breakfast cereals and beverages, and then you take a supplement on top of that, you may be getting a pretty heavy load, so be careful. You can check with the FDA for a list of regulatory reviews of supplements that have been known to cause adverse effects. So if you go to the FDA website on supplements, you can find out if the one you might be using has had any safety issues. Finally, I recommend that you visit labdoor.com, LABDOOR.com. They use an FDA-approved analytical testing lab, and they check out supplements. They will rank them based on label accuracy, product purity, nutritional value, safety, and efficiency. And it's an interesting site. I actually changed the fish oil supplement that I was using after checking out the report, because the one that I was buying was not giving me the amount of the EPA and DHA that the label said that it was. When they tested it, it was well below what the label said. So based on that, I chose a different one that, according to their lab reports, gave me the right amount. So labdoor.com is a good place to look. Aside from water, what are the best drinks to have? I'm actually going to push a little bit here for coffee. If you're not a coffee drinker, that's okay. You don't have to start for this reason. But last week, somebody asked, after I'd already put together the questions and answers, does coffee help with weight loss, and is it a good or a bad drink? And current evidence does not support using coffee bean extracts in order to lose weight. One of the newest crazes is what's called buttered coffee, or another name for it is bulletproof coffee, because it helped an individual lose weight, and they started blogging about it, and you can find recipes all around. Typically, this bulletproof coffee has over 400 calories in one cup because it is extremely high in fat. And that's why they lost weight. Being so high in fat, it became an appetite suppressant, and they weren't hungry. But because it uses butter in the coffee, it's high in saturated fat, and that's not good for your heart. But the benefits of drinking coffee in itself: it's high in antioxidants. Studies are showing that coffee may protect against type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's disease, help promote liver health, heart health, and maybe reduce incidence of cancer. And the studies promoted using 16 to 24 ounces of coffee a day. Be careful what you may put in it. Added sugars, whipped cream, full-fat milk, those aren't helping you. So going back to drinks besides water, I am a fan of coffee. Tea is fine, and sugar-free drinks, as long as you don't do it to the excess. If you drink fruit juices, we recommend no more than 6 ounces a day, because we would rather you get the nutrients from your fruits in fresh fruits. Does rinsing cut shredded or diced potatoes before cooking remove any of the carbohydrates? And no, it doesn't. It removes the residual starch found on the outside, which when you're cooking potatoes, the outer edges will brown much faster than the inner part. And so if you rinse them, you remove that residual starch and you'll get a more even browning. But that's the only thing it does. It doesn't remove any of the carbohydrates. This person asked about a supplement called NCA, and I think you might have meant NAC, which is amino acid supplement. And in prescription form, it's used a lot for lung conditions, but I am not familiar with this supplement, and I would recommend you not use it unless you discuss with your physician first. The next question says, is the paleo diet a good idea? I'm not a fan of the paleo diet, but there are some good things that have actually come out of it. The main reason I'm not a fan is it restricts certain food groups. It's meat heavy, but dairy is eliminated, grains are eliminated, and beans are eliminated. And as I mentioned, beans are packed with proteins and vitamins and some minerals, and dairy is an excellent source of calcium and vitamin D, and even provides some potassium. Greek yogurt, excellent source of protein in the diet and the other nutrients. And as I mentioned, whole grains can actually reduce inflammation. So my biggest concern is that it eliminates entire food groups. Now, some positives that have come out of it is it shuns processed foods, and that's good. We could all certainly reduce the amount of processed foods in our diet. And because the paleo diet has been hard to follow and you can't necessarily find what you need in the grocery store, people have gone more to home cooking in order to stay on the paleo diet. And I see as that's a good thing also. So my biggest concern is what the paleo diet eliminates. And it really shouldn't be what we're eliminating in our diet. It should be what we're eating and are we getting a balanced intake. Because there shouldn't be evil foods or just good foods only. It's more about balanced diet. When consuming products with sugars, what is more harmful, high fructose corn syrup or natural sugars? You might be surprised to learn that high fructose corn syrup, which is used in soda pops and fruit flavored drinks, there's insufficient evidence at this point to say that it's any less healthy than other types of sweeteners. But we do know that added sugars of all kinds, not just the high fructose corn syrup, give us the extra calories. The extra calories may promote inflammation. It may promote weight gain, which can lead to higher risk for heart disease, diabetes, cancer. So keep in mind, natural sugars is what we prefer. We can't necessarily say the high fructose corn syrup is harmful because research studies haven't actually supported that. And that was actually the last of our questions. So they were great questions. I enjoy looking up and make sure that I'm giving you the latest information when you write your questions down. So I appreciate your input and your interest in these topics. And I hope this is the week that you're planning some meals, making some lists, maybe doing some freezer cooking, and enjoying a few more home-cooked meals. So thank you for attending. Next week will be our last chat. We're going to cover this week's topic, but also next week's topics. So we'll hit 2 different weeks in our final chat. Have a great weekend.